Hey guys, welcome to Boxing Squared for boxing news and views from around the internet. Well, since Joseph Parker's win against Hughie Fury, a lot of names have been put forward as potential next opponents for the 25-year-old WBO heavyweight champion. Within hours of the fight, I broke this down so you can out on screen some possible options in a what next type of piece. But that piece did not include Kyotaru Fujimoto, who was 9th in the WBO rankings. So let's work through whether this is actually a credible option, or is this just some misdirection from his promoter, Duco Events, for leverage purposes, and I'll get to that. So Parker's team does indeed have options now that he has a voluntary defence up his sleeve. So following the fight, David Higgins said to reporters, "The world is our oyster now because we have a voluntary challenger, not a mandatory one. We can negotiate multiple deals at the same time on our terms. Kevin and I are looking at," he's referring to Kevin Barry, his Parker's trainer. "Kevin and I are looking at options as far afield as Japan. No Japanese heavyweight has ever fought for a world title in Tokyo." And then there's Bob Arum, our promotional partner in the United States. Okay, so the only Japanese heavyweight that I can see in the rankings, or the WBO rankings, is Kyotaru Fujimoto. I didn't mention him as an option in my other video because that's not a fight that I want to see Joseph Parker in. I'm not really a fan of that sort of potential fight. I'm not even sure Fujimoto deserves to be in the rankings. And why? Well, his record, see it on screen here, it's basically see-through. It's transparent. There is nothing there. He's currently 17-1, with the most notable heavyweight on his record, Solomon Homono, and he lost to Homono. Fujimoto has spent the 5 subsequent years since that loss padding his record with 12 wins against a plethora of journeymen. He even fought a puffed-up middleweight Ishida twice. That's the same guy. You might be thinking, it is the same guy who fought Golovkin about 4 years ago. Remember the guy that he lost to, Homono? He has since been easy work for Joseph Parker in a tune-up fight last year. So a fight with Fujimoto would not be for the challenge. It would be a clear case of ringing the till for those big dollars a fight like this one could potentially generate. As a fan, I'm not really interested in seeing Joseph Parker up against a pedestrian opponent. I saw about 3 years or so of that, of him blowing away bum/journeyman earlier in his career. I've had enough of that. He's the champion now. I guess, you could make a case that maybe he needs a fight like this to boost his confidence and grab a few headlines with a vicious knockout. But if we are all holding the champions to the same standard, and we should, we'd literally have to call it a cherry pick. Fans in general have gotten on Deontay Wilder for the same thing when he's had voluntary defences and ended up fighting highly beatable opponents. So while Parker has managed to hold on to his belt in his O, a fight like this, I think, would do nothing to enhance his reputational standing in the division. So I really hope they do take that into consideration. And Duco have said repeatedly, boxing is a business, and they do have a duty to get the biggest paydays out there for Parker. I'm sure this would qualify if the money is really there. But in the same breath, and this is the point that I was coming to, taking an easy fight risks a hit to his reputation, which, that could end up limiting his marketability going forward. Remember, the bigger your brand, and if you can build it, the bigger the money. Anthony Joshua is proof of that. So let's park the Fujimoto option for a minute and turn to the other avenue mentioned, which is fighting one of Bob Arum's fighters in the US. So Arum, he co-promotes Parker in certain circumstances, which I did cover off in a video about a month or so ago when Arum said he wants Parker to fight Bryant Jennings. Here's a card on screen that can take you to that video, or I'll leave it up at the end of the video that you can click to. Okay, so essentially Arum, he hasn't had the opportunity yet to cash in on these co-promotional arrangements that he has in place with Duco. And remember, Parker is off contract with Duco in a year's time. So it's likely Arum wants to actually get something out of the arrangement ahead of that. A fight with Jennings, well, it's not a bad fight. Jennings is a quality fighter. but there's a few snags here that would get in the way. He's not ranked by the WBO right now. We know Bob Arum has got some juice with the WBO, but he's not ranked, and that's largely because he was out of the ring for almost 2 years. He took almost a 2-year break from the sport. It was a voluntary break. He wasn't, crippled or anything like that. He took some time out. He wanted to get away from the grind, as he put it. His comeback fight in August, he blasted through some of Joseph Parker's leftovers in the form of Daniel Martz. It's all kind of like there's 6 degrees of separation. Parker's connected to these fighters through other fighters. I guess that's the way it goes. But anyway, the problem with Jennings, who's 19-2, he's not a big name. And the time that he had away, that doesn't help the situation one bit. The other option is Andy Ruiz Jr. But the thing is, Parker has already fought Ruiz and beat him. While it was a good close fight, I'm not sure they'd really want to revisit it. As a fan, it's got some appeal for me, but I'm not busting to see it either. So for both Ruiz and Jennings, and this is what you've probably thought, is the interest really there? Is the money really there? They're not massive names. It doesn't really feel like those couple of fights would generate the cash and purse Duco would be after. They want to make some hay while the sun shines and really take advantage of this voluntary defense. So while the Fujimoto fight qualifies on that front potentially, here's another thing to consider. Maybe they're not really looking outside the UK at all. Maybe David Higgins is using misdirection here, and the most viable target remains either Dillian Whyte or Tony Bellew. But Bellew would have to get ranked though. So those two guys, as we know, are Eddie Hearn fighters. Hearn is the promoter generating the most money in the heavyweight division today. He offered $4.5 million to Deontay Wilder to fight Whyte. He's got deep pockets. Throw in the carrot that Hearn has put out there, which is Anthony Joshua is a fight that can happen if Parker gets through one of his fighters, namely Whyte or Bellew. He said this on the record. So for me, Hearn is using the lure of a Joshua fight to try and make money from his other fighters. So that's the big leverage that Hearn here has. And he is a shrewd businessman. I'm sure he's trying to get a Parker fight made with Whyte or Bellew, but at his price and on his terms. So I think Higgins talking about other options, and I think this is, what is at play here. I think this is posturing designed to let Hearn and others know that they've got options. That any offers better be good offers. We've certainly seen in recent weeks how Higgins can work the angles and use the media to drive a point home. The uproar about neutral officials for the Fury fight is case in point. But for me, Higgins also has an ace in the hole here that no one's talked about yet. He's got some leverage of his own that he can use. And what is it? It's time and opportunity. And what do I mean by that? Well, if Hearn misses out on getting this voluntary Parker has, then he will have to wait until the second half of next year most likely, because after this fight, Parker will have a mandatory challenger to face. So Higgins can use this leverage to drive up the potential purse and overall deal for Parker and himself. I know Dillian Whyte would be livid if Hearn told him he'd have to wait the best part of a year to get a crack at Parker, who he thinks he can beat. I wouldn't say that it places Duco in the box seat in any negotiations, but it is a great card to have and a great card to pull. They can stonewall Hearn for weeks if the offers aren't right, or even in the near ballpark. We saw Hearn say that he increased the offer to Wilder. I think he started at 1 and he went up twice. Why would it be any different here if he was trying to lowball Higgins and co? At the end of the day, they don't owe Hearn anything. So they should try to fleece him, especially because Whyte is a proper fight. And some would say Whyte has a great chance in that fight. Similarly, based on my last video, a lot of fans think that Parker could take out Whyte. And for me, it's just an all-in-all good matchup. People want to see that fight, And, it's maybe not 50-50. I mean, some people would favour White, some people would favour Parker, but that's what makes it a good fight. There's no one guy you go, he's going to blast him out of there. I think a majority of fans, if you were to weigh it all up, it's a 50-50 fight, kind of. Maybe slightly one way or the other. So for me, the Japan and USA talk, it's a negotiating ploy, plain and simple. And also consider Duco and even Parker himself. They've loudly been saying the UK will be Parker's base. Parker just said it, less than 10 days ago in a TV interview on Sky Sports. So while money dictates fights, so that means nothing is ever set in stone, it would be a little odd to immediately leave the place you said where all the action is at. Certainly food for thought. Do you think Duco is boxing clever here with his preemptive statement about Japan and the US? Do you really see Parker leaving the UK? What do you make of this potential matchup? Drop a comment, let me know. Okay, that's it from me. Hit like, subscribe, drop a comment, follow me on Twitter, boxing_squared. I'm out.